And then he looked straight at me, gripping my arms firmly, and said, "I carry that same pain. Welcome to Shadows of Stardom." Picture a legend so commanding she could rule a room with a single look. Yet so delicate she spent an entire lifetime concealing a shattered heart. In the quiet dusk of her later years, far from the harsh glare of Hollywood flashbulbs, Katharine Hepburn sat alone in her family home at Fenwick. The woman the world celebrated as cinema's fiercely independent queen was finally prepared to set aside the armor. For 96 years, she bore the weight of a silence louder than any standing ovation. She clung to the memory of a tragedy that stole her innocence and a forbidden love that demanded the ultimate surrender of her pride. To the public, she was an unbreakable icon, a symbol of feminist strength who wore trousers when women were expected to stay in skirts. She embodied defiance, the woman who challenged the most powerful studio mogul of her era. But behind the closed doors of her private refuge, that iron resolve softened into the quiet tears of a woman who had spent decades mourning a brother she could not save and a man she could never fully claim. Why did the most decorated actress in Oscar history feel like a failure when the lights faded? Who was the real Kate hidden behind the razor wit and sculpted cheekbones? Only as the shadows grew longer did she finally reach for her pen. Her hands trembled as she wrote, not as a movie star, but as the wounded girl named Kate. She was ready to name the ghosts that stalked her victories and the demons she had battled in silence. But before we turn the pages of her final confession, we must understand the height from which she had to climb. How did a girl marked so early by death become the most celebrated actress in history? And what was the terrifying cost of wearing that golden crown? When Katharine Hepburn first stepped onto a Hollywood soundstage in the early 1930s, studio executives were at a loss. In an era ruled by platinum blondes and submissive sirens, she arrived as a force of nature, refusing to conform. Sharp-featured and angular, with a voice that crackled like electricity and cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, she broke every rule. She wore trousers when women were discouraged from doing so and scrubbed her face clean of the heavy makeup the industry demanded. She was not there to be admired. She was there to be heard. Her rise was swift, earning her first Academy Award for Morning Glory almost immediately. But the relationship between Kate and the American public was turbulent. The independence that made her fascinating also made her threatening. By the late 1930s, the same industry that had lifted her up turned against her in a deeply humiliating reversal. Independent theater owners labeled her box office poison. They claimed her sharp tongue and aristocratic bearing drove audiences away. Most actresses would have collapsed under such public rejection or reshaped themselves to regain approval. Katharine Hepburn was not most actresses. Rather than begging for roles, she seized control of her future in a way unheard of for a woman in 1940. She purchased the rights to the Philadelphia Story, a script she knew was written for her, and sold it to MGM with one non-negotiable demand. She would star in it. The gamble could have ended her career, but instead it paid off spectacularly. The film was a triumph, restoring her as the uncontested queen of the screen. It was a victory not only for her career, but for her independence. She proved she did not need the system to rescue her, because she could rescue herself. As the decades passed, she etched her legacy into the DNA of cinema. From the adventurous romance of The African Queen, where she matched Humphrey Bogart stride for stride in The Jungle, to the tender family drama on Golden Pond in her later years, her range was unmatched. She became the only actor in history to win 4 Academy Awards for Best Actress, a record that still stands. She was the equal partner of Hollywood's greatest men, most notably Spencer Tracy. On screen, their chemistry crackled, a dazzling battle of intellect and emotion in classics like Woman of the Year and Adam's Rib. Audiences watched them spar and fall in love, seeing in them the ideal modern couple. To the world, she seemed invincible. She had everything: fame, wealth, respect, and a love that burned brightly on screen. Each role she played became a message of courage to women everywhere, proof that you could be bold, outspoken, and uncompromising, and still be adored. But the glow of awards and applause blinded us to the truth. We saw the success, not the sacrifice. We saw the chemistry with Spencer Tracy, but not the devastating reality that began when the director called cut. Beneath the golden armor of the icon, fractures were forming, and the darkness of fame waited patiently to collect its toll. To understand why Katharine Hepburn built such impenetrable walls around her heart, we must look far earlier than the Oscars and flashing lights. The public saw steel, but they never saw the fire that forged it. The defining tragedy of her life occurred not on a set, but in the attic of a Greenwich Village townhouse on a quiet morning in 1921. At 14, Kate was a spirited tomboy who idolized her older brother Tom. He was her hero, her confidant, the person she loved most. Then, one Easter weekend, the laughter ended forever. It was Kate who climbed the stairs and opened the attic door to find her brother lifeless. The shock shattered her world in an instant. What followed was even more damaging. In the Hepburn household, emotion was considered weakness, and public grief was forbidden. To protect the family name, her parents refused to acknowledge that Tom had taken his own life. They insisted it was an accident, a trick gone wrong. They buried the truth alongside their son, forcing Kate to bury her screams.